Gwyn, McKee, and Andrea Orabona did a tremendous amount of work after the last one, and they're going to talk about the standardizing of the region-wide data collection. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm missing my other half here for a second, but as we talked about, one of the goals from last time was try to figure out a way to take the different data sets that are available from all the different agencies being collected for different reasons, try to find a way to bring them all together. One of the goals that came out of the last symposium was to identify various working groups that could help us make progress on these different tasks. And so there were four main working groups: management, research, and database. And those three working groups basically are designed to help inform the fourth one, which is policy. So part of the challenge is, as I say, taking all these different data sets from different agencies and private entities and trying to find a way to coalesce them into something that's available and user-friendly for the folks that need to use them. We just talked about that. Information that would help you plan your projects on the front end, information that would help you avoid work stoppages and impacts to resources. So many people from all the different agencies had multiple conference calls and talking about how to try to do this. And what you see up here is the most recent version of a data set, or a data sheet, excuse me, that was created based on the input from all these different entities. The biggest challenge was certain industries collect information through requirements that don't even apply to other industries or agencies. So for example, if you just looked at the NEST data here, and we're not gonna go through all this, we're just kind of showing you an idea of what we've done so far and how we think it might be able to be used. So something as simple as these categories, which we would all in our heads say, oh, okay, NEST outcome, that's pretty clear cut, right? Well, you might be surprised because everybody's using different terminology to say the same thing. And so the goal is, even though we may not all have to collect the exact same information for the various projects, the goal is when we do collect the same information to try to do it in a standardized way so that when I hand off my data sheet to Game and Fish or Fish and Wildlife Service or BLM or Forest Service, the information I provide to them is interpreted exactly the same way by all the agencies, and that is what helps maintain their ability to make good decisions because they understand the information they're being provided, because now we're all talking the same language. Even though we might think we were on the front end, it was really quite surprising. Just to define an active nest was an interesting situation. So again, we're not going to read to you, y'all can read. And but the idea is to kind of find standardized terminology for all these different categories, age class, nest conditions, all different things. Let's go down to nest substrate, for example. So again, you might say, well, where was that falcon nesting? Oh, it was nesting on a cliff face. Well, was it in a cavity? Was it on a ledge? Was it in what does that mean to say it was on a cliff face? And like you say, it seems like such a simple thing to say it was nesting on a cliff. Well, that's perfectly clear. But if you're trying to manage at a more precise level, having the extra detail and fully understanding what you're being told and shown is really important. Let's go back to the very first page, please. So again, the whole goal is working together among the different agencies. Let's get some standardized terminology. How are we collecting the data? For example, you're out there, a lot of what we do is remote. We're looking at things with binoculars and a spotting scope. You're not actually walking out to the nest in many cases, and you shouldn't be walking out to the nest in many cases. So obviously, during the non-breeding season, to get the actual location, you can. But if you're in your truck and you take a UTM that's identified with that nest, you need to make it clear that your location is where you are in the truck. That's not where the nest is. And again, it seems so simple, but management decisions are being made based on nest locations. That affects, stipulations that may or may not be applied. And so it's really important to be precise and go through everything. So this is a draft still. We're working on a subset. As we heard, BLM has taken this starting point and refined it some. For example, they don't require disturbance information. The coal mines are required to collect disturbance information for every single intact nest. How far is it from the nearest disturbance? What kind of disturbance is it? Is the disturbance in line of sight? So if the BLM doesn't need that data, then it's not necessary for them to collect it just to be collecting it. Although I would argue that having that extra level of information is extremely important to successful mitigation planning, because it helps you start learning about tolerance for different birds. And that's how you get around some of the stipulations, by documenting that kind of information. Let's see here. Some of the next steps is to try to do a field test of it, and we have an example just to show you how it might look. Again, just filling in the fields that you would need. And so it's a little bit hard to see, it doesn't all fit, but you have the ability to record a lot of information in a rapid fashion, because you're usually checking a lot of nests, and you should take longhand notes, that's my personal opinion, but this is a really great way to gather the information that you need in a way that you can easily correlate with other information or compile however you need to do it, so that you can prepare the report that you must turn in. And so by having all of these categories, by having all the tabs to help you walk through it if you're not familiar with it, it helps you collect all this information. And then you can start working on ways to compile the information with, what does Game and Fish have for that area? What does Forest Service? Are there areas of overlap? And we were talking about that right after the last session. How does an operator in this industry know that data already exists for their project area to help them plan on the front end? And that's one of the goals of our efforts that Gary Bouvet will be talking about later with the centralized database and all that stuff. What am I missing, Andrea?
So since this is still in draft form, we're asking folks to go out and beta test it. If you're planning on doing raptor nest surveys, I'm actually working with Tim Beyer with the Forest Service, and we're going to be working together doing raptor aerial nest surveys over the Thunder Basin National Grassland for the next 3 years. So from our perspective, we'll have a chance to beta test the data sheets and codes to see if anything is missing. We ask the same for all of you. If you are have any either ground, aerial, whatever surveys planned, please let us know. We want to get this data sheet and the codes out to those who will use the information, and then let us know what's missing, or how we can turn the draft into a final. Okay. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Tom Bills from the BLM, and I just wanted to kind of respond to something Gwyn said, particularly on the disturbance, and how BLM, we're not asking project proponents to give us disturbance information, and there's a couple reasons for that. One goes back to what Gwyn was talking about in the standardized definitions and the subjectiveness to some of this. So what is disturbance? What exactly are you looking at? Without an exact definition, we're looking at it's just plain too subjective. But another reason is, we have the project proposal, so we kind of know the distance from the well or the road or whatever the activity is to the nest. So we'll have that with the proposal. But secondarily, again, going back to what is the disturbance? Is there a county road nearby? What is the activity? There were some discussions this morning or earlier about how continuous activity may be less disruptive than intermittent activity. So that's a piece of it. It's so wide open. And then the last piece of that too is from a data management standpoint. So I kind of brought up maybe you have a road nearby, maybe you've got a well nearby. That gets to be tough to be put. How do you manage the data when you got those multiple pieces of disturbance? There's other ways to manage that data than necessarily, how would you put multiple pieces into this particular structure?
Do you want to take a stab? Okay, so the disturbance portion of this, I believe, came from our BLM compilers. Sorry, I thought it was BLM. So, well, maybe you should take this then, because I don't deal with disturbance factors. Okay, so what we did was take all the disturbance categories that were being used currently by the coal companies and compiled it into the codes that you see, the codes that you see here. Oh, maybe that, for goodness sake. Sorry, there we go. So the codes that you see, how to measure the distance, what that means, and then this is a specific distance data sheet in this particular tab where you can include those codes. So that way you can, this is more specific because it's a separate disturbance data sheet that you can fill out as you're doing your survey, and then you can also go back to the main data sheet, and here is your disturbance. Those are your disturbance columns. So you actually fill both of those out. Now, as far as the second part of your question, I think that will perhaps be answered by Gary when he talks about the database itself, like how those can be teased out and applied if you're collecting different things.
So right now, at data sheet, you have one data sheet per nest, you can have multiple services.
You can. This is designed not to have one per nest to be, go out and do a survey, use as many as you need. But if you are recording disturbance, then there's a place for you to record it both on the data sheet, and then you also have a separate disturbance data sheet as well. So you can be more specific on that disturbance data sheet. Yep. So, yep. Because we have on that, we have the data sheet itself, and then, down here we have the different types of disturbance. So in the data sheet itself, you would put, for example, if it's an energy facility, you'd put EF in the data sheet itself, in the big data sheet. In the disturbance data sheet, you could be more specific about it. What exactly, within that category, what is that particular type of disturbance?
Some other activity going on as well. So, multiple things going on. You got that county road, you got that energy facility, you got the power line serving the energy facility.
What I should clarify is this was based on coal requirements, and coal requirements are just for the nearest regular human activity. And so we don't record every single disturbance out there. It's just, here's the intact nest, whether it's active or inactive. These are the coal requirements for DEQ. What is the nearest disturbance? Is it a road? Is it a two-track that a rancher uses? Is it an operating oil well? Is it a mine haul road? So it's just for the purposes of the coal mines, what's the nearest disturbance? What type of disturbance is it? Is it in line of sight? But to me, what you're talking about is front-end planning. And when somebody brings you a plan of development and they have all lined out, here's where our wells are gonna be, here's our compressors, here's our access roads, here's our power lines, we're gonna consolidate as much as we can. So to me, what you're talking about is not this. I think this might be able to be used for that, but to me, what you're saying is you're gonna take the plan of development that is provided to you to give you a general idea of what kind of disturbance is gonna be out there on the landscape that might impact other resources out there. Whereas what our intent of pulling that into this database was that so for our project needs, if we're all trying to use the same database, then we have to have all of the categories that somebody might need. So you probably would never even use that. Whereas all of us working on coal properties absolutely have to collect that data. It is a DEQ requirement. It has to go in their annual report every single year. Does that answer your question a little more thoroughly? It would be tough. I would think it would, if I were you, it would be tough to try to take this data sheet and go, oh my gosh, I have 17 different types of disturbance I'm never getting out of here. So it wasn't intended for that. It was one disturbance only, the nearest disturbance. So I'm not sure it would even fit your needs. We have 2 minutes. Any other questions?
Gwyn, one of the questions that I was wondering as we looked at this is, did you develop it in like an Excel spreadsheet? Because one of the things I foresee, and we talked about it during the 2015 symposium, is that at least my agency, I suspect others, have formats that we have to use to put it in, to enter it into our national databases. If it's electronically set up, then I can find somebody who's much more savvy than I am with computers to go in and select the fields that I need and populate the forms that I need in another way so that it becomes not a big encumbrance in us trying to download the information. So is it electronic?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So right now, it's in an Excel format, spreadsheet format, yes. So this is what we would send out to folks. I suppose if you want to, tweak it or change it, you certainly can. Our goal is to have, one data sheet with all the tabs that have codes in it so that everybody can use it. So we're not, again, going down that same road of just having different, a whole bunch of different information out there that's going to be difficult to use to populate the centralized database. So if there, I'd love to send it out to whoever would like to use it or, see it. And then I'm kind of the keeper of the file. So if there are changes that need to be made, I ask that you let me know so that we can come up with that finalized version.
Hi, this is Trish, and I wanted to ask a question. Another component to this is the mapping or the spatial identification of the situation. Have you developed guidelines for mapping? And again, with the disturbance, that's something where, when I could look at this chart and I could see that distance to disturbance, but I think what I would really key in on is a map of that disturbance. So I wondered if you're approaching standardizing mapping as well.
We have not, in this particular smaller working group, we have not discussed mapping. I imagine Gary, where's Gary? Okay, is that something that you would address with the database where you could create maps based on different attributes in the database?
Yeah, there's lots of layers to that. But we could, the location of a nest is certainly a fundamental piece of data that has to go to every record. And therefore, given that it has a location, yeah, then it can be mapped, it can be queried spatially. So, as long as there is a geographic coordinate with each record, then multiple maps can be.
And there will be on this. So I think we're out of time right now, but if you will be around the whole. One more question? Okay, sure.
It's really pretty quick. It's kind of a follow-up to the other ones. It's just, have you thought about creating an application of some sort where you can record this electronically in the field so that you don't have to then copy the data? Because at this point, I think a lot of consulting firms, I'm from ICF, are moving away from paper data and just using applications, our iPads, our iPhones. Have we thought about moving in that direction? Or?
Sort of yes and no. The first thing we want to do is make sure, we get all the fields in there that we need. And then, whatever format folks need it in, we'd be happy to, figure that out so that, again, the idea is that we want people to use it. So, yeah, that's a great suggestion. I don't have the skills to do that, but I'm sure somebody in this room does. Okay? Thank you very much. And I was going to say, we're going to be around. If you want to talk about this more, we have it on a computer, and we can mess with it, today, tomorrow, or let us know if you want us to email it to you. Thanks.